Hello, hello. My name is Iworiosa, and this is Garden Gazette. This is the virtual newspaper of Moon Garden Temple, and this is issue number 1. We're talking about roots and spirit today, and more specifically, we're talking about remembering who you are. If you don't know me, I am an initiated spiritual guide and oracle, and my temple is Moon Garden Temple. So thank you for joining and subscribing to this virtual newspaper. It's a bit of an experiment and I'm glad you're here. Always let me know some feedback. You can always email me at connect@moongardentemple.com. I'd love to hear what you want to hear about in this newspaper. We talk about spirit and roots, and we talk about love and relationships every other week. So thank you for being here, and thank you for taking the time. So we're talking about one of my favorite subjects, remembering who you are. This is one of the tenets of my temple, Moon Garden Temple, remembering who you are, restoring your roots, and reclaiming your power. And oftentimes I notice, like, when I am asked, or when I ask somebody else, who are you? Who are you really? Like, most of the time we kind of go to, like, well, I'm a kind person, and my food heals, and I'm the daughter of this person, or I work really hard. And it's a culmination of the things that we have in this human experience that sort of make us who we are. And so in this issue of the Garden Gazette, I want to encourage you to sort of step back from all those things, which are all important, right? All those things are important, that help you know who you are, what you've developed into, how you've evolved. Those things that are in you that help you express who you are. I want to move back from all those things and start to engage with who you really are inside, like in the most purest, in the most raw way. That part of you, that's the you that you don't necessarily touch or see. It's that you that probably had the most purest expression when you first got here as a little baby and a little kid. That unfiltered part, that part of you that believes that anything is possible. Anything is possible, that there are no limits and boundaries. That part of you that initiates or makes you aware of desires. That's the you that we're talking about. When I say remember who you are, that's the you. And to be more specific and to put it simply, that's your spirit. You are your spirit. That's who you really are. And so for those of you, before I go on, for those of you who are like, yeah, I'm down with this, great. But there are some of you too who are kind of like, okay, maybe I haven't been introduced to thinking of myself this way, as first as a spiritual being, first as a being of light. So it might be sort of a left turn. For some of you, it might feel like a little bit strange to think of yourself outside of the culmination of habits and work that we do and our feelings, right? So if you feel resistance in what I'm saying, then it's okay to kind of just observe and take it in and just see what you connect with. Thank you for taking the ride with me. So for those of you who are there with me, and for those of you observing and listening, that's not the end of it, right? It's not just who we are as just this spirit, right? Which is already powerful in itself. I don't mean to make it sound less because I'm saying just this spirit, right? That's already very, very powerful. Our spiritual power and what is inside us and how we express that is very, it moves mountains, it builds cities, it brings more people into this world, it continues our existence. I want to introduce you into the greater you. And the reason I want to do that is because we have lost a lot of power because this wisdom has been taken away from us, or we've had blinders put on to this wisdom of who we really are and being able to remember it. Why? Because why is it easier when we're less powerful, when we're less connected to who we really are? Well, there's powers out there that want to control and operate on fear, and that really exists in our world. We see how fear and control and manifests into warring and anger and abuse and conflict and chaos and confusion, right? So we know that that exists. We know that we've been affected by it, whether it's right now in this life right now, or it's in our bloodline. A lot of that turmoil that I'm talking about is what separated you from remembering who you really are and not being able to reclaim that power and understand who your roots, and to be able to create and manifest those desires that you have deeply in you. A lot of that created blocks, a lot of that chaos, confusion, turmoil, a lot of that energetic control and abusive power put blocks in you, some that you might know, some that you don't know. And that comes through, your family, the society around you, the way communities are set up, the doubt, the shame, the guilt, all of that is taking away from your power and making it so that it's difficult to remember who you really are. So that's why it's so important to me to help introduce as many people into this concept, this idea, this wisdom that I want to talk about a little bit today. So remembering who you are, who you really are, that greater part of you. So we have like your spirit, but like, where does that spirit come from? Like, how does it get made? And why isn't it how we think of ourselves first? It took me a long time in my own life to even acknowledge like, oh, like inside me, there's something more than like, I kind of like was living it, but wasn't conscious of like, I'm actually more than like Alexandra Lewis, daughter of, Isaac and Kathy Lewis, that is powerful itself. Yes. But it took me a long time to even acknowledge that like, wow, I really am a spiritual being in a meat suit. Like I didn't just exist one day with no roots to anything. I didn't just exist and the human part of this experience is the only significant part of existence. There's just so much more. There's more that we don't see. It's not just out there that's more, it's also in here that there's so much more. So I want to introduce you to this story of a way that you can look at yourself to start connecting to this and to start regaining some of your power by remembering who you are. And by regaining some of that power, you'll understand more about where you come from and your roots. And if there's things that you want to manifest, create in this life, if there's things that you want to meet with in this life that seem impossible, you'll understand through remembering who you are how those things can be more possible. For some of you, some things that have seemed impossible will actually come to you very easily. It'll just show up and you're like, oh yeah, it's because I know who I am now. Like I remember. And then there'll be other things that, it takes some time and some effort. There's things that we need to, it's not just about the spiritual. Yes, we do need to work through our, our habits and our, the things that block us that, we need to work out in our minds. But at the root of all of it, it comes down to like remembering who we are. Whether you are going to therapy or ceremony or whatever, like all of that stuff only means as much as how you participate. And the you that's participating is not just the human you, it is who you really are. Okay, so I've said who you really are inside a million times. The reason I am repeating it over and over and over again is because I want to shake up any resistance. I want to shake up anything inside you that is like solidly like, this is who I am, and it doesn't include the spiritual you, who you really are. So yeah, I am repeating it a lot, and that's because I really want to wake up and activate that part of you that can accept this bigness of everything that you are. Okay. So I want to tell you this story about it. It's like just the simplest breakdown of creation story that I would love for you to try to remember if you can, and just keep coming back to it when you're sort of starting to or getting more familiar with solidifying your own wisdom and your own embodiment that you are spirit. You are spirit. You are this little piece of creator connected to everything around you, right? So think of this, think of a whole bunch of ancestors got together, right? And then a whole bunch of spirits got together. And okay, here's a question. What is the difference between spirits and ancestors? There's so many different indigenous values and old spiritual value stories and wisdoms that will tell you what ancestors are and what spirits are. And for some of you, you might not really use that vocabulary or see it that way. So in this case, sort of substitute what you're comfortable with when it comes to thinking of the divine, how you perceive the divine or these universal energies. Okay, so I'm just going to say spirits and ancestors. So here are your ancestors. These are the ancestors that have lived at some point. They have not evolved through the dimensions to become more pure forms in which they become spirits, right? So they are spirits, but they're not like in the purest form. Like these are ancestors that still are attached to like a specific embodiment of their human life. So like my grandmother, my great uncle, who I'd never know who the name is because it was thousands of years ago. So these are ancestors who have not yet gone through the cleansing, the what they call judgments, the reintegrating into the more pure forms of spirits. These spirits are like earth spirit, spirit of the rocks on the edge of the river, the moonbeam spirit, the thunder being spirits, right? These are spirits that at one point have embodied have embodied spirits that come into human bodies. They put part of themselves into it and come into human bodies. But there's also like a whole collection of when that spiritual energy comes back and rejoins this whole I don't want to say embodiment, but this spiritual energy, this mass of like, spirit of the sun rays, spirit of the maple tree, right? Of these maple trees over here and the maple trees of the north. And it can get real specific, right? And we see how this is reflected in, like, if you have friends or maybe you've witnessed like indigenous names, like you'll hear names that are like the edge of the sun, like Rincon, right? Like the edge of the sun, like that is indicating an actual like group of spirits that like are all around the edge of the sun, which is different than the ones that are from the center of the sun. So you hear that in like people's names and like how different languages or spiritual practices name things or refer to things, right? So we have spirits. This is sort of the more pure spiritual energy. Some people call it closer to God, closer to Mause Bulisa, closer to Allah, right? So like there's different ways to look at it. Remember, I'm giving you a story that's very general because I just want you to start to think of yourself. I want you to remember who you are. I want you to understand what was put into creating you to be who you are right now, right? So we have these spirits, right? The moonbeam spirits, the river spirits, the North River spirits, the ice under the glacier spirit, right? And then we have ancestors. And again, they can be ancestors that you know. They can be ancestors that you have no idea, couldn't even like guess because they go back so far, right? It's not going to be all your ancestors. It's going to be the ones that are paying attention specifically to the making of what they're about to co-create with spirit. So spirits and ancestors. Are you with me still? Please tell me you're with me. Yeah. So these spirits and ancestors come together. And there's negotiations and there's agreements and there's a consulting with the record. Now, some of you may have heard of Akashic record. In my tradition, it's Ifa. They look at the record, they consult the record. These are the records of all things, present, past, and future. This is the record of, what is going on in the era of when this human they're about to put, when this spirit that they're about to make is going to move into a human body. There's a record of that. And they might not be able to access every single thing that is going to happen through Ifa, but they have some idea of what they're delivering this spirit into. Right? So they get together and there's negotiations, there's conferencing, and there's how can we work together to create this spirit. And yes, sometimes there's conflict. and we see that manifest in people, right? What we see here, I know this might sound for a lot of you, this might sound like, oh, this is like too simple. This sounds just like how humans work. Look, as above, so below. Whatever you see happening here in this world, it is a fraction of what is happening in the dimensions that we travel through, that we are, that we come from to come into this human body. I'm giving you such a simplified version. There's so many different stories around this and how it works and how people perceive it. Some of the stories go into alien races and all of that. I'm not saying that any of that is bad or wrong, or that there's any one thing in the other. It's all how we perceive. And if you have not developed your own perception yet of who you really are, the bigger part of who you really are, then this is just a simplistic way of explaining it to you so that you can enter into that realm and reclaim some of your power and understand your roots of who you really are. So they get together and all the conferencing happens, and maybe there's conflict, maybe there's agreements and everything. They create a spirit. Now this spirit has parts of what energies was I talking about? Like parts of the ice of the glacier energies and moonbeam energies, and those are that spiritual energy from those pure spirits. And has sometimes that spirit will embody fully an ancestor. An ancestor says, I want to come back, maybe with some enhancements, or maybe with some things that I didn't have before, or some things that I'm letting go. I'm able to let go of. I've rebalanced these things. They've healed. Sometimes it's like just fully that ancestor is coming back. And sometimes it's like a conglomerate to make, a new spirit that has a whole bunch of different aspects of these ancestors. And then agreements are made. When that spirit is made, there's an agreement. You, the real you, who you really are, make an agreement with these spirits and these ancestors. It's an initiation that happens before you get here as a human being. You make these agreements. You're told some things about this world. You're given gifts, all right? You're given also, there's going to be some burdens. Burdens always come with gifts. And then that's you. That's who you really are. And you have a whole team, spirit team and ancestor team, a whole team that comes with you. They are your helpers. They're here to protect you. Yes, sometimes we have ancestors attached to us who are not here to help us. They're here to push us through a lesson, right? Sometimes it's not pretty. We've all experienced that. But all of that, that's who you really are. So when you get here, right? And you go through your life and you have desire. Remember, you've gone through all your life and all your challenges and all the beautiful things in your life and all your moves and all your developing attitudes and all your habits. There's always a spiritual team with you. Now, we here in the West and probably in other, most developed civilizations, don't have the practice of relationship with ancestor and spirit. It's been stripped away. It's been colonized out of us, because when we understand that who we really are is much bigger than a person in a spirit in a human body, or even not even understanding that we're a spirit in a human body, that we're just human. We don't even realize that we are walking with a whole big spiritual team. I call it spiritual team. You might hear as other things. You might only think of it as like your greater you. That includes the spiritual team. However you look at it, it's not just you as the spirit. It's all those ancestors and all those spirits around you that came with you, that made an agreement together, that gave you who you really are, a piece of them, that initiated you into the spiritual human experience. I know you can feel that. That's powerful. And maybe now you can understand why some of that was colonized out of us, if not partially, but fully. Not that it goes away, but just like the blinders are on. Colonization had to do with being disconnected from our families, our language, our cosmology, our roots in our healing practices, nature. We're colonized from nature. Nature is also our ancestors and our spirit, ancestor moon. Right? The spirit of the trees. That was taken away from us. You see everywhere around you, you see people, what they call decolonizing, but I like thinking of it as indigenizing or re-indigenization, because that centers the indigenous in us rather than the colonization. And you see it everywhere where people are like coming back to the earth. Let's commune with the earth and growing our own food and everything. That's not just about feeding ourselves. That's about remembering who we are, because we're part of that. Those spirits helped create us, right? We are relatives. Like that, people aren't just saying that. We are actually relatives. Okay. So when you don't understand that who you really are, that greater power, that you have a whole spiritual team that is part of who you really are, then you are missing out on so much of your spiritual power, that all you need to do is remember to start connecting. Maybe for those of you who might feel resistance to what I'm saying, it's okay. Like I said before, it's okay. Just try to engage with this story. Maybe play make-believe for a little while and say, what if that really was true? There will be a time when you start realizing this for yourself, that you are so much more, right? Where you will start to look at the world differently, the way you manifest, the way you pray, the way you call things in, and that those things that you meet with, that you have had desires about, it will change for the better. You will start seeing it differently. The journey, you will also, if this hasn't happened already, the journey of it, this ride that you're on with your spirits and ancestors, this ride on that you're on will be so much better. Because now you're including the bigger part of yourself that is here to support you. The last thing I'll say about this is that when you have the desire, right? The desire to be with a partner, the desire to fix a problem, like maybe there's habits that you know are destructive and you want to change that in yourself, or to meet with something, the desire to, go on that trip that you've been dreaming about for your whole life, or meet with a better community to support you in your life. When it comes to those things, those desires, those impulses come from deep within us, within you, within who you really are. And now we know who we really are is like all these spirits and all these ancestors. Those desires are there because the potential for you to experience them is high, if not guaranteed, right? But we have to realize that those desires, if we don't realize, let me put it this way, if we don't realize that those desires are not more, oh my gosh, how do I say this the best way? The desires are not just like Alexander desiring to experience this thing. The desires are coming from the spirits and ancestors. Yes, they came together to make you, the spirit, but if you remember that you are all the spirits and ancestors, then you know that these desires are actually coming from the beings that made you, that knew what was going to happen, that knew what the potentials were when you first got here. The spirit and ancestors don't come in and have you have desires that are impossible. They don't play with you like that. They don't put things into your heart and put desires into your heart just so they can linger there. They put them there because they're possible, if not guaranteed. And I know that's a big statement to make, but because we've been blinded and we don't realize who we really are, and we don't see how big and the power that we have, and that we're not alone in anything that we're creating, we don't even know it's possible. We give up on those desires. We let those desires rot sometimes, and we bury them, and we say, oh, it's not possible. I'm old now. Like the time has passed, and blah, 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 blah. Right? They don't necessarily naturally, organically evolve into something else. We are literally turning away from them and burying them. Look, your spirits and your ancestors will never lead you into the wrong place. So, okay. My encouragement to you is to play with this story, and if you know your ancestry and you know sort of where you come from or what's in your bloodline, I highly encourage you to look up creation story from your bloodline. And if you don't know, just look up creation story from any indigenous or any old spiritual ways. Because you will find, especially indigenous, I want to say actually just only indigenous spiritual ways, because you'll find some version of this story somewhere, and I think the more evidence you see and the more that you play with this and start to see the world change around you, you'll understand that this is undeniable and that you'll remember who you are and your life will change because of it in such a great way. So, thank you. My cat's now knocking things over, so it's time to end this. Thank you for joining me, Iworiosa, in the Moon Garden Temple. This is the Garden Gazette. If you have not subscribed yet, please do subscribe to the Garden Gazette, so you'll get the videos, you'll get them early, you'll get early access, and also the videos that don't go out into the public. Next week is love and relationships, and we're talking about like when it's hard to believe that good relationships exist. So thank you. Mwah, mwah, mwah. Big love, and have a good end of summer.